Hello, and welcome to Day 8 of the Ability event. I'm Joseph Jones. I'll be your host for today, and I'd like to welcome you to Monday, ABILITyx Talk with Anastasia Samoza. Anastasia is a disability rights activist from New York City, and she had the opportunity to address the Democratic National Convention to endorse presidential candidate and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. In today's conversation, you will hear from Anastasia about her experiences there and now, and hopefully you will enjoy the opportunity to learn more about her story and the work that she has been doing. I'm very glad you could join us for this program, and hopefully you'll be able to join us for several other of our presentations and programs in the next couple of weeks. We're excited that you could be here and enjoying and celebrating the 30th anniversary of the ADA, as we also look forward to the next 30 years. I hope you have a great day.
Good morning, everyone. This is Kathy Johnson, and I'm here to welcome Anastasia Samoza, who is our speaker for today. Regretfully, she couldn't join us live, but I was able to have a recording with her yesterday. And so I will be sharing my screen and sharing some background information on Anastasia's interview from yesterday. Before we watch Anastasia's interview from yesterday, though, I would like to share with you a brief clip from her first experience being a disability advocate. It was in 1993, and she was welcomed to the White House under President Clinton and had an opportunity to have a conversation with him about some issues and challenges that she was having in school at that time. So I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully all will work out. Thank you, Gina, for interpreting, our wonderful interpreter today. Great to see you again. Okay, I need to be able to share my screen. Thank you, everyone, for joining us again today, too. And here we are. Okay, here is our screen. Gina, can you give me a yes, you can see this? Thank you, dear. All right, I'm going to play just a small clip from a news article that came out of the day that Anastasia was invited to the White House. It starts with a brief history of Anastasia and her twin sister, Alba, and their family story.
Anastasia and Alba were born with cerebral palsy. Almost immediately, the Samozas noticed a unique bond between the little girls. Alba is fragile and cannot speak, but Anastasia always looks out for her twin, her best friend. And she proved that last February when she was chosen out of thousands across America to meet President Clinton. It was Anastasia's tiny voice that gave the most powerful man in the world a lump in his throat. On national TV, Anastasia pleaded with President Clinton to help her sister.
So because she can't speak, they put her in a special class. But she uses computers to speak. And I would like her to be in a regular class just like me.
Wow. So you just want your sister to have a chance?
Yes.
Good for you. Why is that important?
I don't know. But I thought it was fun being in a regular class. And because I have a lot of friends now, and I thought that Alba would have a lot of fun.
When you heard those words come out of her mouth, what went through your mind?
Yeah, I was astonished, and I thought how wonderful it was, because as every parent knows, you can't put words into your children's mouth.
So that was the day that Anastasia found her voice. Now I would like to share the interview that we did yesterday. And I will put this on big screen also. Jenna, I'm sorry, can you just give me the yes again? Thank you, dear. Whoops.
Well,
Thank
you for having me.
Thank you for being a part of our Ability event, 30 days celebrating the 30-year anniversary of the ADA. So obviously, you know, I love times to just talk with you and chat with you, but this is a formal interview for part of our series, our ABILITYx, on Monday, August 3rd. So we're excited for you to be a part of that. And part of what we're doing too is sharing in our introduction about who we are. So my name is Katherine Johnson. I am a white female, in my mid-50s. I have green glasses, short red hair, and I'm sitting in my home, which is a log home, so you can see the logs behind me in our log home. Anastasia, could you do an introduction, please?
Yeah, I'm Anastasia Samoza. I am in my bedroom with, you can see a white wall and part of a painting behind me that has 2 shades of blue color on it, and you can also see the back of a dark brown bureau. I'm wearing a pink t-shirt with a necklace on, and I've got medium length curly dark brown hair with some pink lipstick on.
We had a beautiful smile to compliment that. So Anastasia, I think back on our relationship and partnership and collaboration, and I think we're going on 8 years now of knowing each other from when we first met. Do you want to share about that time when we first met, where we were and how we met?
We met, it was at the 2012 Clinton Global Initiative annual meeting. You were there because you were mentoring a young woman, Angel, who has osteogenesis imperfecta, who you met through your work in China, and she had been invited to participate in that year's Global Initiative annual meeting. And that's how you and I initially connected, because we talked about partnering on the work that you were doing at the time with Angel in China.
Yep, and I remember you were one of the student workers, so a greeter at the very beginning. And through our collaborative work, our journey has led us near and far to many different countries around the world together. And in celebrating the 30-year anniversary of the ADA, I was reflecting upon when we were together for the 25th anniversary of the ADA. Do you want to share about that a little bit and your experience for celebrating the ADA in China?
Yeah, and we celebrated, as you alluded to, the 25th anniversary of the ADA in Beijing, China. And I did a presentation at it was the embassy, right? The
American Center at the U.S. Embassy, correct.
Yeah. And so I did a presentation for the largely Chinese audience there on the ADA and its background, and my personal story, and why what the law meant to me at the time. And it was a great experience.
It really was. One of the things that I found so ironic about that particular trip was how when we were at the Delta Lounge, not to put down Delta, but when we were in the Delta Lounge, and I was with Anastasia, and Anastasia also had her personal care assistant at that time, and we wanted to go into the lounge. And the people at the desk said, only one person could go with me with my pass to get into the lounge. And we got into this big dialogue with the Delta people that there was only one person with me, and she had her personal care assistant. So it was just rather ironic that even in the United States, sometimes we still have challenges and have to be our own best advocates. But remember that, Tass, how frustrating that was?
Yeah, and now I do remember how we had to explain that I was your one companion, but that I needed to be able to have a personal care assistant. And I think I remember either one of us or both of us actually mentioning the ADA and trying to explain that is a disability related accommodation for me that they needed to be able to make. And one of the things that I said, I think, was I can't use the bathroom without her assistance, her referring to the that I had with me at the time. And at first I remember them looking at us like it went right over their heads, like they either didn't care or had never heard of the law. So, I mean, I think we have, it's helped us come a long way in the last 30 years, since I was 6 years old when it was signed into law. And I think, so I'm considered part of the ADA generation, which means the group of people that grew up with the law, meaning that we didn't know life without it, like the previous generation of advocates like Judy Heumann and others, Ed Roberts, who worked with Judy Heumann on the West Coast, and many thousands of advocates across the country before 1990 to make it become a reality. So I've lived my whole life with, you know, the blessing of having the ADA become the law, but at the same time, throughout all of that time, I've had so many instances like the one you just described, where we've had to defend the rights that are actually enshrined in that law. And we still have to work to convince many different types of entities and public spaces. I guess convince is not the right word. It's really about educating those that still don't understand why public spaces have to be made accessible. For those that still may not know, the ADA also requires transportation to be accessible. So I would encourage all of you who may not know or understand all facets of the law to take some time to read about it and learn about it, because it is the most comprehensive piece of civil rights legislation that protects people with disabilities. So we should all know and understand what that means. And one of our heroes, Judy Heumann, in a recent interview she gave, talked about how people with disabilities ourselves need to continue to educate ourselves about our rights, because a lot of non-disabled people don't understand the law, but I think people would be surprised to know how many people with disabilities couldn't talk about their rights that the ADA covers. So I think Judy was absolutely correct when she pointed that out. It's we need to work on, you know, educating people with disabilities about their rights, so that when they're not being met, we can speak up about it. And similarly, our allies need to be educated, because we won't shift the needle far enough in a forward direction if it's just people with disabilities like myself advocating it. It's going to take more than just the community that's directly impacted, like me, through our lived experience to really make the change we need to see in the next 30 years, which I think really is about moving it beyond what Judy recently called it was an emancipation proclamation sort of document for our community. That's what the first 30 years did. It sort of helped us say, hey world, here we are, and we're not going away. But now the next 30 years, we need to work on making the accessibility and inclusion that it enshrines. We need to make it more, rather than it being a minimum standard, we take it to the gold standard. So live rather than buildings and other entities saying, I'm meeting the requirements of the ADA because let me show you how I've met the minimum requirements. We need to move beyond that and make sure that we almost don't think about the ADA 30 years from now, because inclusion is such a part of the way we live our life, so that I won't have to think about whether I can show up to a building and use a toilet because every bathroom is accessible for all of us, whether we necessarily need it or not. And I think we need to think about accessibility and inclusion as helping everyone, not just those of us with all different types of disabilities.
Right. And as other people have pointed out, the accessibility impacts all of us, you know, that it's an opportunity for parents who have children in strollers to use the curb cuts, and it's a win-win for all of us for the accommodations. And right, I agree, not just the minimum, we need to be looking at, I think I love it how you say the inclusion revolution. And on your website, Toss Speaks, can you share a little bit about what was your motivation for the inclusion revolution, and how do you embrace that as a core value or core theme within the disability advocacy work that you do?
Well, one of the other quotes I have on my website talks about how I genuinely believe disability is a part of the human experience. I think right now, today, disability is still thought of as something that you want to avoid, that people who have disabilities are admired, oftentimes for the wrong thing. And when I say that, I mean, like, I shouldn't be, you know, the fact that I live my life sitting down isn't in and of itself something to be admired. But if you want to admire me for the things that I've achieved and actually accomplished, that's a different story. I love when I hear from people who say, you know, I admire, like you said, the way you do your advocacy, or the trips that you've taken abroad to advocate for, you know, equality in China and other parts of the world. If somebody came up to me and said that would make me proud. That would make me feel good. But what I experience more often is people just getting excited because they see me rolling down the street, or because I've successfully gotten out of bed in the morning. So what I say is, we will have achieved further progress when all of us think of disability as what it is, which is an inherent part of the human experience. So it's no more or less human than what you, Kathy, experience every day. And the more we can find ways to achieve that. I think the way that I've done it is just to live my life. It sounds really simple, but the more of us that are seen and that are given opportunities to work and to not only to be a part of the competitive workforce, but also to lead in the competitive workforce, no matter what industry is. If you're interested in philanthropy, if you're interested in education, if you're interested in, you know, politics and public service, I think one of the ways I hope to see change, and that's already starting now in all sorts of industries, and I have a lot of wonderful friends with disabilities who are not only disabled but members of the LGBTQ plus community, and come from are considered marginalized for several different reasons outside of their disability, and those are the voices we're starting to see published in the New York Times. So more opportunities for people with disabilities of color, you know, publishing articles, telling their stories, running for office. Those are the kinds of things that are going to make more change than we've already achieved over the next 30 years. So we need to be given opportunities and seek opportunities that allow us not only to be included, but also to lead in those efforts.
Excellent. So Anastasia, you had shared that at the age of 6 was when the ADA was passed, right?
1990, yeah.
1990. And then when you were at the age of 9, you had your first opportunity to really serve as an advocate. And everyone who's watching this was able to see that first. So we started that for your ABILITYx show. And so they saw the interaction that you had at that moment, which really was the door opening for you to find your voice and to be an advocate. And do you want to just briefly share about your journey with President Clinton and how that catapulted you into your role as an advocate moving forward?
Yeah, so in around the time that I got the opportunity, President Clinton got elected in 1993, and about 1 month after, in February of 1993, my mom got word. My mom, her name is Mary Samoza. She was already becoming a well-known advocate in New York State. So she was up in Albany, New York State's capital, advocating with a group of parents who, like her, had small children with disabilities, like my twin and I, and somebody came into the room and pulled her out and said, you know, we've just found out that President Clinton is trying to get a diverse group of children together to come to the White House to talk to him about anything that they want to understand better, anything they want him to address during his time at the White House. And they said, we want children with disabilities to be represented. And they knew my mom had us, my twin sister Alba and I. And at the time, my twin sister Alba had just started using the earliest types of augmentative communication devices, so a computer that allows her to speak. And she was just starting to learn how to use that. So my mom decided that it would be best, because of the environment and all of the cameras, and because nobody else was going to be allowed to be in the room, that I was going to go. And I took the opportunity to speak to him about helping my parents with the fight they were already in, which was to mainstream my twin sister, to mainstream Alba in the New York City public school system. So for some reason, I was just placed in a 3rd grade mainstream classroom with, 20 something other kids, and I was the one that had a visible disability at least. But my sister was we were in the same school building, but she was in a class just with her and other children who had varying types of disabilities. So it wasn't true inclusion. Most of her and the rest of her classmates were separated and isolated, and that was not in the spirit of the ADA, and my parents were fighting to change that. But when it came to my twin sister, there was much more resistance because her level of cerebral palsy is a bit more involved. She's nonverbal, and she can do a lot less for herself physically than I can once we're in our wheelchairs. So I spoke to President Clinton. I told him a little bit about her. I actually explained what the computer, I took the time to explain that to him as well, because I knew she wasn't there. And then I asked him, as you guys all saw, to, I would like her to be in a regular class just like me, because, I'm 36 now, but back then I was 9. So in my head, for me, it was, I wanted her to have the same experiences that I was having. I was meeting all kinds of new friends and being able to socialize and getting obvious experiences that she wasn't having. And in my head, I understood that the president was important. So why not ask him for his help? And that's how our relationship started. And then both President Clinton and Secretary Clinton since then have been extremely supportive of mine and my sister's educational progress, as well as helping to open doors for us to gain professional experience, which now as an adult is, I always realized how lucky I was to have them in our corner, but now as an adult, I really realized how crucial it was that they supported my development in the workforce and my ability to get that experience, because now I think the biggest thing that I'm trying to fight with my family and other advocates is for people with disabilities like myself who require home care, who require somebody, like you mentioned, my PCA earlier, right? So I can't get out of bed, I can't dress myself, I can't put on makeup, I can't I can't do most of the things that you, Kathy, and others take for granted and can do for yourself. I need help to do that. And for people with disabilities like me and my twin sister who need help with those activities of daily living, those are the kinds of things that are under attack right now from state governments and from the federal government. All of those services are being cut, both at the federal level, but also at the local level in most states. And so what's most important to me now is to figure out to work with not only my local government here in New York State, but also on a federal level, and so to make the change nationally so that people with disabilities don't have to choose between their health care, so my ability to have a personal care assistant, which I need to live, and my ability to advance in the workforce, because I am working but I'm also only working part-time in my position as a public servant for the Speaker of the New York City Council. And one of the biggest reasons I'm only working part-time is because if I do more than that, the services that allow me to get out of bed in the morning will be cut. So healthcare is a really big fight for us now.
Mhm.
And so is increasing our ability to better integrate, because even those of us who are in the workforce are still having to turn down promotions that we've achieved through good work performance and that we should be able to attain based on our education, but have to turn down because otherwise literally life-saving services will be cut. And it was through my sort of relationship with the Clintons and all of the advocacy that my mom taught me and continues to teach me, and others like Judy Heumann and a bunch of advocates in New York and all over the country that I still turn to for advice and mentorship so that we can all work together to make these changes. I brought up Judy Heumann a lot during this interview because she is extraordinary, and one of the things she's been giving a lot of interviews lately in the last month for a while now because her extraordinary book is out, but especially this month. And I heard her recently as well talk about how even within the disability community, people who are less disabled, less outwardly obviously disabled, are still more accepted than those who have really, really significant disabilities. So again, she acknowledged, even though we have come a long way, one of the things that I agree with Judy, that for the most part, somebody who has lesser physical disabilities will gain more opportunities to, thrive in all kinds of areas of life. But I will also add that I think we don't do enough to recognize that indivisible disabilities are real too. I think we need to do a lot of work to accept people for who they say they are and not have to do all of this work to prove that they're disabled enough to be guaranteed the rights that they have in the Americans with Disabilities Act or the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Like, we have to still work really hard in educational settings and professional settings to say, I am allowed to have this accommodation based on this law, that law, and the other law, and the work that it still takes for those of us who need accommodations, especially those of us who have invisible disabilities, whether they're more related to mental health or, the disabilities that are covered under the ADA are very, very, very wide ranging, and I don't think all of those disabilities are appropriately acknowledged in society today. So while I do think that Judy Heumann is absolutely right, folks that are less disabled than me, like if you have a less significant cerebral palsy, you might be able to walk without a walker or without walking sticks or without crutches. But my level of CP, and even more so Alba's level of CP, is very evident because I have a wheelchair. I can't hide it. And Alba is nonverbal, and she has less control of her arms and her eye movements and all of those things. And she has this extra device on her wheelchair. So Judy Heumann is right, but we also have to do better, not only as a not only within the disabled community, but beyond that, allies have to do better at supporting those who have invisible disabilities from all walks of life, and even more so the other communities that I mentioned a little bit earlier. You know, disabled people of color, disabled people who are members of the LGBTQ plus community, all of those communities that are marginalized in more than one way have an even tougher time getting up to a free, appropriate public education and opportunities beyond that. So I'm really excited to see those things continue to change.
Wow. Very well said. So we did have Judy Human on last Thursday as our presenter for our for our 30-day event of the 30-year anniversary. And you're right, I just love listening to Judy. But I think also, Anastasia, I want to recognize you as the ADA generation of finding your own voice of advocacy. And you really have grown from the time that I've met you and known you these last 8 years. You have found your voice, and you're getting to that point where people are starting to quote you. And, you know, so it's this new generation of young leaders that are coming up. So I'd like to just, I know we've been talking for quite a while, and at the very end, when we're done with our interview, we're going to be sharing one of the highlights of your life, I know, but can you share from your perspective before we view the video at the DNC with Hillary in 2016, can you share, as the person living that moment, as a young advocate, what was that like for you before we have an opportunity to view that?
Well, in the moment, I was very human, I think, which is what I like to remind. That's the overall part of my message, that, as I said earlier, being disabled doesn't make me any less or more human than everybody else. So on a very basic human level, I was extraordinarily nervous because I recognized what an incredible opportunity it was, and I was very conscious of how many eyes and ears were gonna be on me in that moment, and I was nervous about, I recognized what an opportunity Secretary Clinton, her campaign, and her family had given me, the extent to which they trusted me to represent her and the campaign and them and Americans with disabilities in that moment. So it was an out-of-body experience. It was extraordinary. I remember up until the last moment, even when I was giving that speech, so having still negative thoughts, honestly, running through my head the whole time. Like, what, are they crazy? Like, what if I mess this up? Like, I'm not strong enough. I'm not capable enough. I'm gonna mess up. It's gonna be a complete disaster. Even while I was saying the words, every second of those 4 minutes, I was worried about, I was taking shots at my own, in my head, because of how grand and big the moment was. And I think I didn't, even when I was on that stage, I didn't trust myself as much as they trusted me. So I would encourage, it taught me to, like you just said, I'm still learning how to trust my own voice and my own power. And I think I hope that if your audience can get, one of the things I hope the audience gets from this is, it's okay if you start out as a leader and don't feel as comfortable. You don't have to you know, wait until you feel like you're going to be completely comfortable and until you cross all of those T's and, you know, dot all of the I's, because if somebody had asked me whether I was prepared for a moment like that, I would have never given myself the credit. I would have said, I can't do it. And not because I didn't want to, but because I was fearful. It's scary sometimes to recognize the power of one's own voice. And I think that's what I'm most grateful for, is that is a constant reminder that I did do it and I can continue to do it. And I actually, every time I watch that, I get nervous because I remember what it was like, but I force myself to watch it sometimes just to remind me that I can take on the next challenge. Sometimes when I'm doing something that makes me nervous right now, like working on finishing my memoir or whatever the next big challenge is, I honestly, seriously, sometimes watch that because it's my reminder that I was terrified in that moment. And even though I was proud, there were parts of me that thought I wasn't going to, until it was over and until people started reacting to it, I didn't feel confident in it. So
you killed it. I mean, it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. And I know that was 4 long years ago.
Yes.
And now we're coming up to the next election. And I guess I'd like to end this interview just asking you, because I know you've been involved now with the Biden campaign. And can you just share what you hope for in this next president?
I do have to confess, I just started, you know, becoming more involved, and I'm hoping to serve right now in a volunteer capacity, hopefully as a member of, you know, one of the disability policy committees that they're convening, and I'm still working on making that official. But so far, what I've seen from Biden and his campaign, I'm really excited about, because I can tell with the disability policy that you can already see on his website and articles that have come out even within the last couple of weeks. There was an article that came out that talks about how he plans to put $775 billion, I think it said, that he plans to devote to families who take care of, you know, people in their families like me. So parents who have been out of the workforce for like 25 years because they've been, you know, raising their child with a disability, they are going to be able to, because when my mom turned, you know, 65, she didn't have, and she went to the Social Security office, they said, you're not eligible because you had a 15, 20-year gap in your resume. So I can tell that Biden is listening to advocates, because he's recognizing that people in the care workforce, people who work with me to make sure that I can live my life, need to be recognized and need to have the ability to live a better quality of life themselves. So they need to be able to earn a living wage if they're working in the home care, healthcare field, working with someone like us. So I'm really excited. I can tell by some of those policies and speeches that are coming out that he's listening to advocates that I know, that I'm friends with. So I'm really excited to see what he continues to do. And I have no doubt that that he is ready and willing to listen to us, and I'm also very optimistic and excited about him. I'm sure, hiring people with disabilities, and in his administration, I'm sure he's gonna Obama. Some of my friends and advocates worked in the Obama administration, and I have no doubt that Biden will continue that. So I'm excited. November can't come soon enough.
So what would be your advice to young people with disabilities about voting and being an informed voter? You mentioned going to Biden's website and reading what the different disability policy recommendations that he has. But what words of encouragement can you give to young people about voting? And
well, they can also get involved. Like, if you want to understand what Biden is doing, and if you don't feel like you have a good grasp on how he's representing our community, and to be honest, I need to fully check in and get to know more of his staff and the people working for him and find this out in a more detailed way. And one of the ways to do that, even from where I sit, even today, I plan on volunteering. Like, somebody sent me an opportunity, and you can still do those things virtually. There are phone banking opportunities. There are plenty of opportunities to join conversations virtually that Biden is having. So I would say, be present, and if you have access to a computer, the internet is your friend. That's another element I think that we need to continue to work on in terms of the disability advocacy space. I know that the internet is not accessible to the full spectrum of disabilities out there. So I needed to put that plug in while I was mentioning that. We need to make the internet more accessible to everybody. But for those of us and I know there are people that are working, I'm sure, with the Biden campaign to make sure that that happens. That includes capturing videos and doing a bunch of other things on actual websites so that those who are deaf and hard of hearing or who have low vision or blindness can access the internet in the same way, and someone like my sister would need to use a screen reader. So all of those things are not perfect, but I know that people are much more aware of that. So I would encourage, like, honestly volunteering and getting involved, trying to keeping up with the news and find, ways to engage with the Biden campaign, but also local representatives where you lived. I mentioned where you live. I mentioned briefly before that now I work for the leader of the New York City Council, and that allows me to stay tuned into what's happening locally in New York City and New York State, and that's really important as well. So, and it looks like most of us are going to be voting by mail, and in a lot of ways that makes it much more accessible to those of us with disabilities, because we don't have to, if we're voting by mail because of the pandemic this year, that eliminates some of the barriers that sometimes we have to worry about, like not being able to physically access our polling site if we're in a wheelchair and there's no elevators, or so I'm hoping that voting by mail in some ways will knock down some of the barriers for at least those of us who have some types of disabilities. And as with everything, we're not all the way there in terms of making voting and the political process completely inclusive and accessible, but that's why it's important that people people like me and others, and hopefully many of you will get involved locally, because that's how jurisdictions in Minnesota and across the country are going to change. They need local people who live there to say, hey, I can't get into this polling place. I want to attend this event. It's only the people who live in those places that can make those changes happen. So educate yourself about your local representatives and find ways to get involved. And then if you notice that vote is not accessible to you because of your disability or because of the other challenges you may face, then you can be the one to raise that with your local institutions and representatives.
Excellent. So I know not everyone has the opportunity to go out on the DNC platform, like we're going to be able to say, but everyone has the opportunity to vote who is over, a voting age. And so I do hope people take advantage of that and listen to your advice. It doesn't have to be the national stage. It can be the local stage. Yeah. Local politics, state politics are as significant as our national politics. And so all of them matter. So Anastasia, this was really fun. I miss you so much. And I love being with you and working with you and traveling with you to China. Someday that opportunity will open up for us again. But right now, I just want to say thank you. You have really begun to seriously find your voice, and you are so articulate, and I am so grateful for this opportunity to be with you. So, yeah.
Say hi to Amy. Congratulations, Amy. I'm pulling this off, and I'm so excited to have been a part of it. I'm sorry we can't be there. I can't be there in person, and I'm sorry I couldn't do this live tomorrow morning, but thank you for the opportunity to pre-record it, and I hope it goes really well tomorrow. And please let everybody know that they can reach out to me via my website. I'd love to hear from people if they want to get in touch. So don't be afraid to say hi.
Okay, we'll be sharing in the chat box Anastasia's webpage, where it is Toss Speaks, and her email address is found there that you can reach out to her. Anastasia, we also really look forward to your memoir coming out that shares so many more details of your life of advocacy. So when that comes out, we will share and support your work through that experience too, okay?
Yeah, I tell lots of crazy stories from our adventures in China as well.
Yeah.
So you all have that to look forward to as well. That's a fun chapter. But
it was an amazing journey on the Great Wall. Lots of great stories to share, Anastasia. So thank you so much for joining us today. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So now I'd like to be able to share the actual opportunity that Anastasia had serving as an advocate on the DNC platform. And that's how we're going to be ending our event today. So stay tuned. Let me get this one up.
56 million Americans with disabilities so often feel invisible. Hillary Clinton sees me. She sees me as a strong woman, a young professional, a hard worker, and the proud daughter of immigrants. My father from Nicaragua and my mother from Ireland. She has shown me that all these aspects of my identity are strengths which will help me affect change. I fear the day we elect a president who defines being American in the narrowest possible terms, who shouts, bullies, and profits off of vulnerable Americans. has shown us who he really is. And I honestly feel bad for anyone with that much hate in their heart. I know we will show each other and the world who we really are in November when we choose genuine strength and thoughtful leadership over fear and division. Donald Trump doesn't see me, he doesn't hear me, and he definitely doesn't speak for me.
Okay. All right, everyone. So
Let's get after it. Cases are still going up. This
sorry.
virus has enormous capabilities. Everyone is quiet on Twitter.
Okay, there we go. So sorry about that. Thank you everyone for joining. And that message that Anastasia just shared 4 years ago, honestly for me, it still resonates. And so, sorry. I'm thankful that everybody joined us today. And I'm really thankful that Anastasia was able to share yesterday. And Gina, thank you for interpreting. We really appreciate you being involved, and all of the interpreters through all of our activities. And so we invite you to join in tomorrow for our 30-day event. We have Frances West joining us at noon. And Frances has written a book called Authentic Inclusion, which is from the business perspective of the value of employing people with disabilities. And so it should be a phenomenal session again tomorrow at noon. So please join us then. Thank you, everyone. Closing off for today, August 3rd, of our 30-day event celebrating the ADA.